Something people say to me every so often, well, sometimes, well, more than once, is that it's a shame that there's no direct interchange between the Elizabeth line and the Victoria line. Except there is, kinda. The point of the Elizabeth line was to offer a quicker route across London, east to west, than was possible with the Underground. As such, it connects with most of the other tube lines. The only two exceptions are the Waterloo and City line and the Victoria line. Now, the Waterloo and City is just a shuttle between Waterloo and Bank. You can reach Waterloo via the Bakerloo, Northern and Jubilee lines, and you can reach Bank via the Central, Circle, District and Northern lines, or the Docklands Light Railway. I don't think the lack of a connection to the Elizabeth line there is mourned much. The Victoria line, though, that's a more glaring omission, on the face of it at least. You see, the Victoria line was meant to do for the north to south route what the Elizabeth line would do for the east to west route. It's a shortcut across the city. I don't think it's as successful as the Elizabeth line because it was built in the 1960s in a very different economic climate to the Elizabeth line. London Transport, predecessors to TfL, designed it to a fairly minimal budget, in accordance with the predictions of the government who thought public transport was on the way out. As a result, the stations are very small, they get very crowded, and it can get uncomfortably hot, particularly in the summer. Most galling of all, though, the Elizabeth and Victoria lines actually directly cross paths at Oxford Circus, but while the Victoria line does stop there, the Elizabeth line does not. It stops at Tottenham Court Road and Bond Street, but not Oxford Circus. Ah, but here there's a twist in the tale. Because you see, there actually is an interchange here. It's not a very obvious one, but it is there, and you can see it when you look at TfL's list of out-of-station interchanges. In London, the railways are very densely packed in, and that means that while there may not be a direct interchange, there might be two stations that are so close together that they are practically interchanges. TfL calls them out-of-station interchanges, which means you're charged the same fare as if those two stations were one. So let's say you get a District Line train from Cannon Street to Tower Hill, you leave Tower Hill, you walk the short distance to Fenchurch Street, and you get the train from Fenchurch Street to Limehouse. Your Oyster or contactless card will register that as a single journey from Cannon Street to Limehouse, and the people who collect the fare data will be very confused as to why somebody didn't just take the DLR straight from Bank. This is just an example. So there's a similar deal with Oxford Circus and Bond Street. See, the thing about the Elizabeth line platforms is that they are very long. So long, in fact, that in some places they connect two stations. Farringdon and Barbican, and Liverpool Street and Moorgate, are two sets of stations with this curious phenomenon. And in the case of Bond Street, the eastern end of the Elizabeth line platforms is only a short walk from Oxford Circus tube station. It's only about 200 metres or 220 yards between the Regent Street exit at Oxford Circus and the Hanover Square exit at Bond Street. It seems counterintuitive to say that Oxford Circus and Bond Street are an interchange, particularly given that they're two separate stations on the Central line. But as walks between lines go, it's no worse than the interchange between the Bakerloo and Hammersmith and City lines at Paddington, or the Metropolitan and the Thameslink at St Pancras. So, there is an interchange, just not an obvious one. The Elizabeth line skips Oxford Circus, the logical place for a true interchange, because if they didn't, you'd probably just have one continuous set of platforms from Tottenham Court Road to Bond Street, and the trains would take forever to get there. It is worth pointing out that while there is no proper interchange with the Victoria line, so to speak, it is possible to get to most of the stations on the Victoria line via other stations from the Elizabeth line. The southern end is mostly the exception. Pimlico is only on the Victoria line, Victoria needs a circuitous ride around the Circle line from Liverpool Street, and Brixton and Vauxhall can only be reached via the Victoria line or mainline services that don't connect with the Elizabeth line. But in truth, all the interchanges are more difficult than that secret one at Oxford Circus. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this disconnected tale from the tube. If so, it would be very kind of you to leave a like, and it would make me pleased as punch if you'd subscribe if you have not already done so. I would like to give a big thank you to my donors on Ko-fi, on Patreon, and here on YouTube for your support. You are the dotted line to my out-of-station interchange. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.